Namaste, my dear brothers and sisters. A happy Easter to all of you. Easter is a reminder of the immortality of truth, truth with a capital T, the total truth, which is the same as the divine. Although humanity has a tendency to prosecute it rather than appreciate it, as Sri Aurobindo says in Savitri, cross is the payment for the crown. The human beings make it difficult for anyone to really salvage them, because the one who promises them the kingdom of God, the crown, is the one who gets crucified, but then you can't really kill the truth, the divine, even by crucifixion. It resurrects itself. Today, the 31st of March, is very close to the special event that happened on the 29th of March 1914. That's 110 years ago. The title of the session is Stay Temporal, Outcome Eternal, which is a bit intriguing and does not apparently seem to be very closely related to the event that happened 110 years ago on the 29th of March, but then that will become clear as we go along. I look upon the event that happened, that is the first meeting between the mother and Sri Aurobindo on the 29th of March 1914, not so much as a historical event, but as a significant milestone in a mega project. Like, if there's a mega project, like you have to construct a high-rise building which is more than 100 stories high, then there will be a lot of preparation before it, and then there will be some milestones through which it will go. That is the type of project in which 29th of March fits in as a very significant milestone, and that perhaps is more significant than its being a historical event. Because historically speaking, one might say, well, the mother came the first time on the 29th of March 1914. She went away on the 22nd of February 1915, less than a year. Her total stay was less than a year. On the other hand, when she came the second time in 1920, on the 24th of March, she did not leave Pondicherry for even a single day till she left her body in 1973. So a stay of less than a year in comparison with a stay of more than 53 years tends to pale into insignificance, as if the main thing was her stay for more than 53 years. The initial one was just a beginning. It was the first, so in that sense it has a significance because it was the first arrival, but the stay was very short. But then if one views this event from another point of view, not just as an event which is relatively insignificant as compared to what happened in 1920, then one finds that this in fact was an extremely important milestone in a mega project. And what was that mega project? The project which Sri Aurobindo and the mother came to accomplish here was a totally unprecedented type of a goal for any spiritual master. They were the first two who made it as a mission, their project, to change the very human nature. Because essentially how human beings behave depends upon what human nature is, and the type of world we get depends in turn on how we behave. And if one were to put it very briefly, for thousands of years, man's consciousness has been such that typical human nature has been rather self-centered, if not always selfish, and that is what we may call an ego-centered personality, in contrast with another type of possibility which is there, because after all human being is a manifestation of the divine. In contrast, it is possible for human beings to have a love-centered personality, which looks upon others as not different from them, as a part of them. So this sense of oneness, which is rooted in our spiritual reality, inspires love and that in turn would change human nature, and if that changes, we can have a better world. In fact, that is the only radical solution to wiping out all the problems of human existence. Because the world has typically been considered to be a place of misery, sorrow, and suffering, and the maximum that has been expected is that an individual may be able to work out his own salvation by following a spiritual path, but the world as a whole will not change. That has been taken as axiomatic. But then Sri Aurobindo and the mother were the first spiritual masters to emphasize that just because it has been so for thousands of years doesn't mean that it will always be so. And a rational sort of an, support for this type of a vision would be that there has been a constant evolution, starting with the involution or self-limitation of the divine to become matter, from matter to life, from life to mind, and so on. And all this evolution can be looked upon as a progressive unfolding of the supreme consciousness hidden even in what we call dead matter. It's not dead, it just seems to know nothing and can apparently do nothing, and that's why we can call it inconscient rather than dead. And this divinity, this supreme consciousness, which is hidden in matter, has been unfolding, revealing itself bit by bit in small steps as matter led to the evolution of life, and life to creatures which also had a mind, and man is the latest product of that process. But there's no reason to believe that he's the final product, because man is still quite far, very far from manifesting the total divinity, or coming anywhere close to manifesting the hidden divinity in a way it can be seen as divine. That's why, man hardly looks divine. But then man is the first creature who has the aspiration to evolve and also the capacity to do so. And this has been expressed by a select few, once in a while, across cultures, across geographical barriers, who have manifested divinity so completely that they end up being our saints, sages, and rishis, and spiritual masters. So those select few have at least shown us the possibility of that type of an expression happening. And what Sri Aurobindo and the mother have visualized is that what has been something restricted to a select few will, through this process of evolution, become more and more the norm. A lot more will start coming closer to our saints and sages, and the result will be a perceptible upward shift in the level of consciousness, which in turn will translate into a radical change in human nature, which will become more and more love-inspired. Now, this is a mega project, an unprecedented project, and both of them had to accomplish it together. And like in any project, you have to go through a mega project like this one has to go through a preparation, and that preparation had been going on for a long time. And of course, that preparation, when it happened in the divine design, in the occult worlds, we do not know, but whatever is on the surface is itself quite fascinating. If we look at the type of preparation that Sri Aurobindo had, he was born in a particular type of family where he was sent away to England for a period of a long period at the age of 7. When he was just 7-year-old, he was sent away to England, where he stayed 14 years, and with his sharp intellect, he not only understood and assimilated the Western culture, particularly the English language, but he also looked at it critically and could find what are the flaws there, why this type of a civilization is doomed for failure. When he came back to India, he spent another nearly 14 years in Baroda, where he went into the ancient Indian scriptures in their original, and did the same with those scriptures, understood them, assimilated them, and looked at them critically. So he became a very rare East-West synthesis. On top of that, he had a very sharp intellect and phenomenal spiritual capacity. Now, this is a combination that is totally unprecedented in human history, but same time, since he had taken a human form, he had to go through a human process of preparation, and this preparation consisted of these two major phases, but then that was not all. After that, he jumped into the freedom struggle. And that also played its role in further extending the preparation. And both these phases, one might say, revealed themselves through two major spiritual attainments, two events in which he attained a super consciousness level. That is a level of consciousness which is completely out of the ordinary. Towards the end of his stay in Baroda, under some little guidance from Vishnu Bhaskar Lele, he attained a state of samadhi in which he experienced the unmanifest divine in just 3 days, something which most people can't do even in a lifetime. And then towards the end of the freedom struggle, and it became then because of what happened in prison. When he was in prison from 1908 to 1909, during that period he had another spiritual experience, Sri Krishna being present in everything and everybody. He saw Sri Krishna in the walls of the prison, in the jailers, in the prosecution council, in the defense council, in the judge, and he started having a dialogue with Sri Krishna. So this was an experience of the manifest divine, the divine making itself visible in different forms. So the unmanifest divine and the manifest divine, they completed sort of the picture and made him the type of spiritual master that he ended up becoming. So seeing Sri Krishna in that, in the manifest forms of the divine was also a part of that preparation. And what was another very significant thing was that by having a dialogue with Sri Krishna in prison, he discovered that his mission in life was not to continue with the freedom struggle anymore. That could be taken as a foregone conclusion. That's the promise that he received from Sri Krishna, that the country will be free. Sri Krishna told him, that's my promise to you. And as if to redeem that promise, the country did become free on the 75th birthday of Sri Aurobindo. But then, instead, what did he have to do? That also he was told, wake up India to its greatness and share with the world the wisdom that only you can give. And we can understand why only he could give it, because he was such an unprecedented combination in history, unlikely to be repeated any time in the near future. So that's why only he could do what he did. Present ancient Indian wisdom in the contemporary context in a language that the Western countries will understand, and they were going to have a very high level of receptivity for this wisdom. Why? That we'll not get into. That time was coming, and that's why it was necessary for a person like Sri Aurobindo to share that wisdom the way only he could. And India rising was again important, not only for India itself to wake up and become great once more, but for this, even this India to be able to play a role, Indian wisdom being able to play a role in giving the world what the world wanted. So for that, India's political freedom was important, but then the Indians waking up to their greatness was even more important. And that was also one of the missions that Sri Aurobindo was given. The two missions were in fact interrelated. What he had to do for the country and what he had to do for the human race. So this was the preparation, and Sri Krishna himself telling him that this is now your mission in life, in a way became the sanction and approval of the Supreme. The Supreme, sealed it with his rubber stamp that this is your mission in life. So received that seal, sanction and approval, the way, if you have a mega project, a big building, as was compared in the beginning with a high-rise building with more than 100 stories, if that has to be constructed, you'll think about it, you'll plan it, you'll have in your mind a type of picture of the type of building you want, but eventually you'll have to apply to the municipal authorities and get the approval for the plans. So that plan was approved in a way, you can say, by Sri Krishna in prison by telling him this is what you have to do. Now let's see what the mother's preparation was. The mother, since childhood, started giving evidence of being an unusual child. She was not interested in frivolous activities like the circus and the zoo. She was very contemplative by nature. And when she was asked by her mother, her biological mother, Why are you so serious? Has the burden of the whole world fallen on you? She said, yes, I have come to relieve the world of its misery. Then when she was a teenager, she started having visions of being in a long flowing dress which would spread out like an umbrella and cover the whole sort of town around her, extend to long distances, and people would see that robe and come and touch it, and as soon as they touched it, all their sorrow, suffering and misery and whatever problems they came with were gone. So this is the type of vision she had. And then she read the Gita and in French, and after that she started seeing an Indian-looking face in her visions, and she named this face Krishna. And then, she started having studies. She went and studied occultism in Algeria, and then she started having study circles in Paris, where people with a relatively high level of consciousness collected together, and Mother was sort of their leader, giving them her vision of the future. And we get some glimpse of it from what she said in one of those meetings in 1912, 2 years before her first arrival here. What she said on the 7th of May 1912 was that the work to be done by us, that is the work to be done by that group of people who were collecting regularly in Paris, that the work to be done is what? To become conscious of and unite with the divine presence, to realize the higher planes of consciousness and put the earth in connection with one or more of the fountains of universal force that are still sealed to it. That is, the universal force has always been there. The force of the divine has always been there. But some higher planes of that force have been sealed to the earth. The earth has not been open to them. They have been denied to this earth. And our task is to put the earth in connection with those fountains of that wisdom and that force, which means that those seals can be broken. So something completely unprecedented she already had in mind, and she has put it in beautiful words here. Put the earth in connection with one or more of the fountains of universal force that are still sealed to it, and to speak again to the world, the eternal word. The eternal word, like the Om, has been spoken repeatedly to mankind, but there was a need to speak it again against the backdrop, against the background of those forces getting unsealed. Those which were sealed, those seals are broken, they have been unsealed, and then there will be a need to speak that eternal word once more. And finally, for what? Collectively, to establish an ideal society for the flowering of the new race. Can't be more explicit than that. Mother looking at an ideal society and a new race. Already in 1912 on the 7th of May. And it's interesting that the same year, 1912, on the 15th of August, Sri Aurobindo experienced a prolonged realization and dwelling in the Parabrahman for many hours. And then he wrote, to re-explain, that is what needed to be done, the work to be done. The Mother also talked about the work to be done, he also talked about the work to be done, to re-explain the Sanatana Dharma, that is the eternal wisdom of Sanatana Dharma, which is universal in nature, which has been valid for all times, will be valid for all times and all places. It has that breadth, that flexibility, which makes it universal, which Sri Aurobindo has talked about in much greater detail in the Uttarpada speech. But then to re-explain the Sanatana Dharma from a new standpoint. That same wisdom has to be explained from a new standpoint in contemporary terms and with a futuristic vision. To re-explain the Sanatana Dharma from a new standpoint, and then he goes on to say, to establish a yogic sadhana which will not only liberate the soul but prepare a perfect humanity, which means to work out a method of sadhana in yoga which will be totally again different, which will not aim at individual salvation, but which will not only liberate the soul. Soul is an individual, Soul is individual divinity. The main difference between the soul and the spirit is that the spirit is universal, whereas the soul is individual. So far the yoga sadhana has been for individual liberation, that is the liberation of the soul. But here he says that to establish your yoga sadhana, which will not only liberate the soul, but prepare a perfect humanity, which means a sadhana which will have a collective goal to prepare a perfect humanity. So see the identity between the vision which Sri Aurobindo and the mother have both expressed in the same year, 1912, just a few months apart, although they were geographically separated by thousands of miles. So all this preparation so far that was going on of this common vision which they had, which can't be anything but a part of the divine design, was going on far away from each other geographically. But then they had to meet because the type of project they had to accomplish, that could not be accomplished completely from that long distance. It can't be done even now. You can't do it online. You have to. So they had to be physically close to each other. And in that sense, their first meeting, 29th March 1914, acquires a very special significance. One can say it was like the laying of the foundation stone. So far all the preparation was going on. The municipal authorities had approved the plan. They had a vision of what had to be done. But then the foundation stone had to be laid. And that is what happened as a result of this meeting in 1914. And again you find that once the date of the foundation stone laying ceremony has been fixed, more or less the plans had been made when the mother will travel from France to Pondicherry. So the date had been fixed, you can say. Once the date is fixed, then you, in anticipation of it, one can understand there will be some excitement, and the mind will start dwelling on that ceremony in anticipation of it, because such a great event is going to happen. And that is obvious from the mother's prayers written from February 1914 onwards. From then onwards, you find that she is talking about a few things. If one were to sort of put together the main points that she has made in a very large number of prayers between February 1914 and soon after her arrival in March 1914, towards the end of March 1914, in those 2 or 3 months, the poems that, not the prayers that she has written, the prayers that we find in the prayers and meditations, which may not be all that we actually the prayers, because some were preserved and some were destroyed. But even what has been preserved gives us a clear idea of the type of prayers she had from February 1914 onwards. And the chief points that she has made in those prayers are, firstly, expression of great anguish at the present state of humanity. That we are living under miserable conditions, in a lot of darkness, which is the result of darkness or ignorance. Secondly, that she had an aspiration for a radical change, that this cannot last forever. Now time has come for a radical change. She had that aspiration. And then this aspiration that she had was rooted in her love for everybody. She had an immense love for humanity. So almost all the prayers end in a prayer of universal significance. She is praying for all of us. So this aspiration for radical change was rooted in universal love, and for that she was invoking the divine all the time, invoking the grace and guidance of the divine. She was invoking the divine so that her aspiration could be fulfilled. So in a way you can say the divine invoking the divine, but then she was behaving human like all avatars do. So she was invoking the divine. And like a good devotee, she repeatedly in many of those prayers says that she is ready to give all that she is for that. So she was ready to get consumed in the process of her aspiration being fulfilled. Everything was placed at the disposal of the divine. Even when she saw that she could sometimes have a very peaceful existence, if she confined herself to her own mental peace, instead of bothering about the rest of humanity, she quickly reminded herself, no, this is not what the divine expects of me, and I'm ready to go through all that it is involved in getting involved in the evolution of the human race. Whatever difficulties and hardships are involved, whatever inner turbulence and agitation I have to experience, I'll accept that also gladly as a part of the divine will, as a part of the mission that the divine has given to me. And so she was ready to give all. So it all connects into a chain: her anguish at the present state of affairs, aspiration for a radical change which was rooted in a universal love, and invoking the divine for that, and ready to give all that she was, all that she had to the divine for that mission to be accomplished. And then came the actual meeting on 29th of March 1914. These prayers started somewhere around February 1914. Towards the end of 29th March, that's about 2 months later, came this actual meeting. And when this actual meeting took place, there was instant recognition, because Sri Aurobindo and the mother already knew what they were here for, and that this was now just sort of a culmination of a long preparation which had been going on thousands of miles away, but it had to happen. And in a way you can say that again this date had been fixed even on the earthly plane 4 years in advance. In 1910 Sri Aurobindo went to Pondicherry. The same year, the mother's husband, Paul Richard, went to Pondicherry, and that is when it was decided that the next time he'll come with, not alone, but the mother, and that was to be 4 years later. So it was all worked out in 1910, and Sri Aurobindo needed those 4 years for perhaps further preparation, because although the preparation was already of a very high order when she went to Pondicherry in 1910, after getting the seal and sanction of the Supreme around 1908 in prison. But when he went there in 1910, probably he needed to be more or less alone, all by himself, in what Professor K.R.S. Iyengar calls the cave of Tapasya in Pondicherry. So he had to spend those 4 years there before the next stage could begin. So 4 years, his 4 years of his stay in Pondicherry from 1910 to 1914, and we got a glimpse of it from what he wrote in 1912 during that period, that now led to a complete and thorough preparation. And then came the mother, and what both of them said after the meeting. During the meeting there was total silence, no words needed to be spoken. But what they recorded soon after that is significant. The mother recorded, "I was seated close to him, simply like that on the floor. Suddenly I felt within me as if a great force, peace, silence, massive. And then on her way out, she says, I didn't have a thought in my mind. I was absolutely in a complete blank." So she's tried to give a verbal expression to the type of experience that she had in that total silence when, as she says, she was just seated on the floor in front of Sri Aurobindo. And then Sri Aurobindo has recorded this same event like in these words, "I had never seen anywhere a self-surrender so absolute and unreserved." Completely unreserved, without any qualifications, total and absolute self-surrender. That is what he could see in the mother. So all the preparation that the mother had, all the vision that she had, she treated it as a sort of a preparation, as if she was starting from scratch, and now she was to be guided by Sri Aurobindo. So a total self-surrender. And then just the next morning, this meeting took place on the 29th March 1914 at 3:30 p.m. And the next morning, early in the morning, the mother again wrote a prayer, the way she was writing those days every day. And this is a prayer which is quoted so often, the one that she recorded on the 30th of March, just the next morning after their first meeting. "It matters little that there are thousands of beings plunged in the densest ignorance. He whom we saw yesterday is on earth. His presence is enough to prove that a day will come when thy reign shall be indeed established upon earth." So now she had that assurance that the vision that she had will actually be fulfilled. It matters little that there are thousands of beings plunged in the densest ignorance. So, seeing the dense ignorance around, and as a result of it, all the chaos and conflicts around, which was so visible in 1914 because the sort of atmosphere was building up for the First World War. So she says it matters little that there are thousands of beings plunged in the densest ignorance. And why she says it matters little? Because she says, he whom we saw yesterday is on earth. So just Sri Aurobindo's presence on earth is enough to give the assurance. What assurance? That a day will come when thy reign, that is the reign of the divine, that is the kingdom of God, will indeed be established upon earth. The kingdom of God will indeed be established upon earth. Sort of a great coincidence that we are talking about it on Easter Day, the establishment of the kingdom of God, which Jesus Christ also talked about. So it matters little that there are thousands of beings plunged in the densest ignorance. He whom we saw yesterday is on earth. His presence is enough to prove that a day will come when thy reign shall be indeed established upon earth. So now they were assured that now the one important thing has happened, at least in spite of being for so long thousands of miles away from each other, now they were at the same place. But then just being at the same place was enough. They had to play their individual roles. And that role crystallized in the formation, in the decision to start a monthly journal called Arya. The meetings that the three of them had, Sri Aurobindo, the mother, and the mother's husband, Paul Richard, the meetings that the three of them had finally crystallized this idea that we need a monthly journal which will do two things. Look at in a very systematic way the deeper questions of existence. Like, who am I? How did it all begin? Why am I here on earth? What is the relationship between human beings and the rest of the creation? And so on and so forth. So it will look in a very systematic way at the basic problems of human existence. And secondly, it will work out a synthesis of the various religious and spiritual traditions of the world. These were the two major objectives with which this journal was started, and it was named the Arya. Now, in order to sort of get out of the way, a slight misconception which sometimes people have about the word Arya and Aryan because of the meaning that Hitler gave to it, that he used the word Aryan for a superior race of Europeans as compared with particularly Jews whom he looked upon as an inferior set of human beings. That is not what this Arya meant. And this, of course, was considerably before Hitler, historically speaking. So what Sri Aurobindo had in mind was the ancient meaning of the word Aryan in the Indian culture. And that Professor K.R.S. Iyengar has given in this. The word Arya expressed a particular ethical and social ideal, an ideal of well-governed life, candor, courtesy, nobility, straight dealing, courage, gentleness, purity, humanity, compassion, protection of the weak, liberality, observance of social duty, eagerness for knowledge, respect for the wise and learned. These were the type of personality traits, characteristics which the word Arya embodied. So the word Arya connotes certain qualities of the mind and heart. Those words which I just read are Sri Aurobindo's words, which Professor Iyengar has quoted, while Sri Aurobindo is trying to sort of explain the title of the journal Arya, that it has been named the Arya, and Arya embodies all these qualities: a well-governed life, candor, that is frankness, courtesy, nobility, straight dealing, that is being straight, not crooked or cunning, courage, gentleness, purity, humanity, compassion, protection of the weak, liberality, that is no narrow-mindedness, no conservatism, observance of social duty, eagerness for knowledge, respect for the wise and learned. So Professor K.R.S. Iyengar then says, so the word Aryat connotes certain qualities of the mind and heart, certain aptitudes and aspirations, and has no reference whatever to race. Doesn't talk about any particular race within the human race. An austere and uncompromising aspiration and a sustained and determined endeavor alone mark the true Aryan, and when, after his trials and ascents, he reaches his goal at last, he becomes the perfected Aryan, the Arhat, master of the three rungs of the ascending spiral of consciousness, the individual, the cosmic universal, and the transcendent. These two books that I have with me, and I must confess I have not read all of them, I read very little from these two books, but they are very well researched biographies. One is the biography of Sri Aurobindo, other is the biography of the mother by Professor K.R.S. Iyengar. They are amongst the most authoritative, well-referenced biographies of these two spiritual masters. So when you have any doubt, as reference books, they are very good. So that is the meaning of the word Arya. And then, what was the significance of Arya? Why was Arya such an important development, establishing this? Because, you see, if such a mega project is there, then you need a certain philosophy to be worked out, which will guide the further work. And that is what Arya ended up doing. And why the presence of the mother was important for it? Well, of course, they had a common mission and they had to come together, that is understood. But then you can see that Sri Aurobindo's preparation was essentially complete by 1914. But then he had still not actually started anything towards sharing that philosophy with the world, towards giving the world that word which only he could give, as Sri Krishna had told him that this is your mission. That work had not yet started. There's always a reluctance in starting such a mega project, or even the blueprint of that project. And it's something like, if you need a trigger for it to start. The preparation was all complete. He was full up to the brim. But then a trigger was needed, and that came in the form of the arrival of the mother and her husband, and this decision to start the Arya. And then, the mother and her husband leaving soon after that in 1915 also perhaps had a significance, because the three of them had continued to work continuously on the Arya for another 5-6 years, it might have been a different type of Arya. Because they went away in 1915, Sri Aurobindo became the only person, sort of the entire responsibility for bringing out this monthly journal fell on his shoulders. And it was very easy for him, because by now all the preparation was complete, just a little trigger was needed, and once that little balloon had been punctured, there was a tsunami of wisdom that flowed on the pages of Arya, page after page at remarkable speed. And it's said that although the journal was a monthly journal and it had 64 pages, Sri Aurobindo wrote those 64 pages essentially in 1 week. The remaining 3 weeks he was doing something else. And what did he do? He chose 5 or 6 topics, and on each of them, in most of the issues, he wrote one essay. And the pride of place was given to the Life Divine, what later on became the Life Divine. And of course, those articles were under that probably broad title. But that was spiritual philosophy, because the philosophy had to be worked out. As you know, one of the missions of Arya was to address the problems of human existence in a systematic way. And nothing could have been more systematic and rational, and approach it from the way it would be accepted by the modern mind than was done in the Life Divine. So the pride of place was given to those essays, which eventually became the Life Divine. But then there were other topics apart from spiritual philosophy which he took up: the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Gita, and the Indian culture and the history of the world from a psychological standpoint, which eventually gave us the twin works, The Human Cycle and The Ideal of Human Unity. So these were essays on, one essay on each of these topics in most of the issues. Later on, what was done was to dismantle these issues and put them together subject-wise in the same sequence as they had appeared in the Arya. For example, all those which were on spiritual philosophy, when they were put together in the same sequence in which they appeared in the Arya, gave us the book that we today call the Life Divine. And in the same way, we got the Synthesis of Yoga, the Secret of the Veda, Essays on the Gita, the Foundations of Indian Culture, the Human Cycle, the Ideal of Human Unity. So much of the major works of Sri Aurobindo were created through the Arya. And this sort of gave a complete blueprint for that mega project which both of them had to accomplish, both Sri Aurobindo and the mother. And again, to explain the significance of the Arya, Professor K.R.S. Iyengar has written something very beautiful here. The Arya was altogether a bold and unique adventure. It was much more than just an attempt to forge a new synthesis of knowledge. It was very different from an exercise in academic scholarship. It was not an elegant or ingenious variation of one or a mixture of the traditional philosophies. It was not sort of a rehash of whatever was already there. Say, just some sort of a playing around with the traditional schools of yoga or some sort of a rehash of all the existing spiritual philosophies. It was not an elegant or ingenious variation of one or a mixture of the traditional philosophies. The real aim of the journal was, as Sri Aurobindo pointed out, to feel out for the thought of the future, to help in shaping its foundations, and to link it to the best and most vital thought of the past. So here he has quoted Sri Aurobindo's words, to feel out for the thought of the future. That the vision was futuristic. It was not just a rehash of the past. To feel out for the thought of the past, to help in shaping its foundations. So you can see the vision of what the future will be like, to shape its foundations, is being done without any precedent. Nothing like that had been done. So it's completely, totally uncharted territory. And that is something very different from just sort of working out some sort of a mixture of what already existed. To help in shaping its foundations, it means of the future, and to link it to the best and most vital thought of the past. At the same time, not completely in there, making use of the foundations of the past. As Sri Aurobindo said somewhere else, the past is our foundation, the present is our material, and the future our summit. So the past is the foundation which we cannot ignore, and without which we could not be where we are today, and without which certainly the question of going anywhere in the future does not arise. So the past is important. So the past is our foundation. The present, our material. That is the material on which we have to work so that we can have a better future. The material which you have to mold for a better future, and the future is the summit, that peak which we are aiming at by working on the present material. So that is was the significance of Arya, and therefore the Arya being sort of the foundation stone, that's why I called it the foundation stone laying ceremony. Sort of. The foundation of that mega project that was laid during that, and therefore that was something very significant, and therefore this first visit in 29th March, although the stay was very brief, was of great significance, and then after that followed other phases from 1914 till early 1921 went on the publication of the Arya. When that work was done, then Sri Aurobindo started feeling enough has been written, the philosophy is all there, now it has to be put into practice. And as if on cue, arrived the mother in 1920 when the work on Arya was about to be stopped, and then she needed another 6 years for various things, including her own sadhana, because she was behaving as if she was starting from scratch. So that went on till 1926, and then came Sri Aurobindo's Siddhi Day on the 24th of November in 1926, on which the Sri Aurobindo Ashram was formally established in Pondicherry, and then became sort of a division of work. The mother concentrating on the outer work, trying to see whether this philosophy could be put into practice in the modern world, and Sri Aurobindo taking care of the inner work, which was still needed to take the world closer to that state which they had in mind. So the division between the inner and the outer work, which was something which had to be there because one body could not have done which the two could do. So that's why the soul was one, the consciousness was one, as Sri Aurobindo said, but there were two bodies because two bodies were necessary for this type of a division. And what is remarkable sort of a thing, that they were born at places which were suited for this. Sri Aurobindo, having an Indian origin, having been born here, was probably more suited for inner work. The mother being born in the West, more suited for outer work, because perfection in outer work is the hallmark of the West. And that's how, having both of them, we ended up getting the best of the East and the best of the West. So all these systems that the mother established in the ashram in Pondicherry seem Western, like the administrative procedures, setting up of departments, the discipline, administration, punctuality, cleanliness, gender equality. All these things she did far ahead of her times. Putting the girls and the boys together in sports dress in playgrounds, was something completely new in the 1940s, unheard of in India. But she did it. And we got the best of the East and the best of the West. And both inner work and outer work are important in integral yoga. So that's what, from 1926 to 1950 was one phase. 1950, Sri Aurobindo left the body, and then 1950 to 1956, another phase. 1956 was the arrival or descent, or you can say the emergence of the supramental consciousness on 29th February, which again we celebrated recently. And then 1956 to 1973, you can say, was another phase when the mother was still physically in the body. So after 1973 has been other phase where we have been left in this world to do our homework. Sri Aurobindo and the mother are not there in the physical, but still they are there to those who approach them, and they are still there to guide us. But in the physical, you can see that they were here. If we say Sri Aurobindo arrived in this world in 1872 and the mother left this world in 1973, so almost exactly 100 years. You can say about 101 years. So from 1872 to 1973 can be considered a very glorious and unprecedented century in human history. Just one century, but what a mega project was conceived and planned for and executed, and leaving behind homework for all of us for several centuries to come. So one can say this period from 1872 to 1973 was a 100-year miracle in the history of the world. And once again, going to the comparison with that high-rise building with more than 100 stories, there's one major difference between that and this project. Of course, there are many differences, and that project is nothing compared to the project we are talking about. This is a much bigger project. This comparison only is for namesake. But all the same, there's one major difference which again we can see if we stick to the analogy. This building with more than 100 stories does not have to be constructed on a blank plot. Nobody has given us that plot. If you had a plot and you made all the plans, had the blueprint, you got the plans approved by the municipal authorities, and you laid the foundation stone, you dug the foundation, you erected the building, that would be a relatively simple thing to do. But imagine, there's already a building there, a building that you don't want, and a building occupied by people who are refusing to vacate it, a building which is pretty strong, which has solidified and hardened over centuries. To break that building and put this 1,000-story structure, new one, just imagine how difficult it will be. There'll be so much resistance by those who have already occupied it. And that is the type of situation we are in the world. And that is the type of resistance everyone who wants to change the world faces. And that's why Sri Aurobindo says in Savitri, hard is the world redeemer's task. It's not easy. It was difficult for Jesus Christ. It was difficult for Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. It's going to be difficult for all those who follow in the footsteps of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. Because that old structure has still not been demolished. It's far from demolished. So think of that old building which is still there, very strong, hard, by no means weak, although not desirable in many ways. It may be imperfect, but it is not weak. And unless you demolish it, unless you deconstruct the old order, how can you have a new construction? So that is one big difference between the analogy with which I started, and I end with that analogy. So we have been given a double task to break the old existing structure without losing what the old structure has gained. Retaining its gains, the past is the foundation. Retaining the gains of the past, to dismantle the past, to demolish what is undesirable in it, in spite of all the resistance, and to construct something new. That is the type of mission that we have been given, and we have assurance from the Master and the Mother that it will be done, it will happen one day, and what is expected of us? Very little. The Mother says, all what is expected of you is what? I can end it on a very simple note after giving you all this mind-boggling vision of a picture of what is yet to be done. Be simple. Don't complicate things with too many things in the head. Be simple, like a flower. The flower just opens and the fragrance starts spreading. So be simple like a flower. Be simple. Be happy. Now how can you tell be happy like a command? Bhai dukhi ho to main dukhi hu. How can I be happy? But it can be a command. That's what the Mother. Be simple, be happy. Because they have given us the secrets of how you can be happy irrespective of external circumstances. That is what integral yoga is about. So be simple, be happy. Do your work as well as you can. And to that one may add a prayer which the Mother has said. The prayer is, let me do in the best way I can the best thing to do. So do your work as best as you can. And what is it that should work? What that work is? The best thing that I can do. And let me just do it in the best way I can. Not necessarily the best way possible, but at least the best way I can. So do your work as well as you can, and then remain open to me. Which means do not have doubts. Do not make your intellect work overtime so that you start asking unnecessary questions. Do not get distracted into the bylanes of spirituality. Do not start talking too much about spirituality, thinking that just because I have talked, something has been done. We get that illusion that just because we have discussed something, we have understood something, we have talked about something. So people like me, I don't think that I have reached anywhere. So by doing that, one should not be under the illusion anything has been done. One can do all that without going very far on the spiritual path. So be simple, be happy, do your work as well as you can, remain open to me. Remain open to me means don't create those obstacles which are so natural for the human mind to have. So remain open to me means remain receptive to me. And finally, she says, that is all what is expected of you. Thank you.